Okay, this one kind of falls into sort of the same sort of silly, just entertaining, my opinion rants that like the Medusa rant that I started with. Um, anyway, uh, the Lord of the Rings. In the movie version, Aragorn is kind of portrayed as someone who's trying to, in TVtropes.com terms, ignore the call and just fight Sauron as a basic ranger and all that. The reason that I've heard about this, I don't know whether it was Jackson's reason or the reason from the fans, was that it made him seem a more interesting character than the book version, who basically, as again tvtropes.com.org term, jumped at the call. Because apparently people were of the opinion that Aragorn in the books is very close, if not already, a quote-unquote boring, invincible hero. It kind of is that way. There is nothing that Aragorn runs across that is really going to give him much trouble, except for the Balrog at the beginning. Or long-term one of the Nazgul. I mean, he even drives off 5 of the Nazgul himself when they're weaker. Later in the novel, towards the end of towards Return of the King and Two Towers, the Nazgul have grown in power because Sauron has grown in power. And also I think they are stronger the closer they get to Mount Doom. Not really sure of that. Anyway, Aragorn has been fighting for 83 years. He's been dogged in his opposition of Sauron. In the book, he's been aware that he or his descendants are going to be the one who would return to the throne of Gondor. Him or another, because there's some sort of prophecy about the return of the king, or I don't know if it's prophecy or if it's a rumor that got turned into a prophecy or whatever. But the fact is that the line has been kept safe so that Isildur's heir, can eventually return to the throne of Gondor and be used as a weapon against Sauron. And he knows this, and he's pretty willing about that. Unlike in the movie, where he's like, I don't want that power, I never wanted that power, blah, 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 blah. Now, I mean, in the book, Aragorn even, granted it's off-screen, Aragorn takes the Palantir and has a mind-to-mind confrontation with Sauron and manages to win by after showing Sauron the Sword of Elendil reforged, which scares Sauron enough to break off contact. I don't think Aragorn would have won if Sauron had kept contact up at that point. But this kind of thing, Sauron is assuming that Aragorn is the heir of Isildur, and also that he is the one who has the ring. So Sauron, being what he is, and wondering if maybe he's going to be facing something that might actually be powerful enough to threaten him, runs. And this is kind of par for the course for Sauron in the books. The whole reason for the destruction of Eregion, who created the Great Rings for him, was because he discovered, hey, these guys made the 3 rings and are now onto my plan. I have to kill them all instead of subtly influencing them like my plan was originally. I'm not really sure you could say he panicked, but I kind of think he did. Anyway, Sauron's very smart. He's not up on physical challenges so much. If you look through the Silmarillion and onward, he really only likes physical confrontations where he thinks he is far and above what he's fighting. So anytime he thinks there's something equal, he runs away. He ran away from Luthien and Beren. He ran away every time, basically, that he got threatened or felt he was threatened. And by the time Lord of the Rings comes around, he's reduced in power somewhat. The ring has kept a lot of his power up. The ring has kept a lot of his power up, but he's still weaker in power. Anyway, Aragorn, back to the subject at hand, I got off track a little bit. Aragorn takes the Palantir deliberately, plans out the confrontation, does a psychic battle with Sauron, and wins. Granted, he played it a little cheesy by revealing the sword of Elendil and saying, "Hey, look, the thing that killed you and took your ring is put back together. See, I got it." Yeah, that's kind of cheesy, but he pulls it off and then uses the Palantir to find some things that Sauron was trying to keep hidden. Like the fact that the Corsairs were coming up the river to be reinforcements for Sauron's forces, and also making it hard for those countries along the river on the way down to the ocean down there, making it hard for them to send reinforcements because they have to leave armies in place to guard themselves. Okay, so again, Aragorn pretty much in the first book he basically drives off the five of the Nazgul. He fights through however many orcs, the Watcher in the water, which I don't think they really kill, they just sort of drive it off. He doesn't fight the Balrog, but yeah, I don't think he was close to being well prepared enough. He fights the Uruk-hai when the party is broken. He fights at Helm's Deep. He fights trolls. He fights lots of things. He goes and faces the ghost with no trouble. There are a couple places where he feels a little bit despair, like when Frodo goes off on his own, he's wondering if he's failed. And he eventually decides fairly quickly, because, well, if he didn't figure it out very quickly, it would have dragged on, and then he wouldn't have been where he needed to be to help with Rohan. But he does face some questions every once in a while. But Aragorn never doubts the call. I mean, in the movie, he gets the Palantir by accident and has to be kind of pried away from it really quickly. This is when they discover Pippin with it. And that's the only time you really see him using the Palantir or hear about it. I think they just threw that in as a nod to the fact that he had that psychic battle with Sauron and, pwned him with a cheap trick. But hey, all's fair. So a lot of people were really, I guess, they found Aragorn rather boring. All honesty, Aragorn's not the focus of the story. Aragorn is really not the most interesting character in the story. I've always never felt that. It's not his story. He's helping Frodo and the hobbits. It's the hobbits' story. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people felt he was a boring, invincible hero. And then there was the whole his whole angst thing is over his relationship with Arwen and his sorrow that she's going to give up her immortality to be with him. That's where his angst and the part that makes him human comes in, but that doesn't come into Lord of the Rings all that much. We see shades of it, but it was never Lord of the Rings was never going to be their story, so we don't see all of it. We don't see Aragorn and Arwen's travails that brought them to being where they love each other. We don't see, I mean, in the Lord of the Rings, the movie, we have the whole thing about Elrond being disapproving of the relationship because he doesn't want to see his daughter die. But in the book, he was kind of sad, but he was okay with he accepted it. He was realizing that was his sacrifice to protect the world, really. His sons also stayed behind, though, so pretty much Elrond, who made the choice of being immortal when it came time to it, he is a half-elf, not a full elf. Elrond, who made choice of immortal, all of his kids made the choice to be mortal. Anyway, Yes, so taken just looking at the fact that very little has ever gotten close to threatening Aragorn physically, except for maybe the Balrog right at the beginning. Yeah, well, not at the beginning, halfway through. Except for that, the fact that almost nothing threatens him kind of is a necessary element to one of the themes I've seen in Lord of the Rings. Granted, this is Tolkien we're talking about, so it's kind of hard to say that the author intended it this way, since the one thing we're sure of on Tolkien saying is that the author didn't intend it to be read any specific way or another. There's the way he reads it for himself, and then the way I read it, the way the next person reads it, and so on. He's kind of started the idea of came up with the term applicability. I don't know if he actually started it. It probably is older than him. Anyway, it is said throughout the book that a victory of arms is not possible at this time and place. That Sauron has control of far too much of the world of Middle-earth for the free nations to do anything by military. That they could keep winning battles, but that there is a near endless supply of people for Sauron to throw at them. By this point, Sauron has extended a lot of his control far, far, far to the east. At least that's the implication, that everything to the east is under his sway. In fact, you don't hear you hear a little bit about it, but you don't see it. The Dale and the Lake Town and a lot of other settlements that are out in that wild, empty west, where there's hundreds of miles apart and have really no help. I mean, Gondor, there are major cities and major countries within 2 to 3 days travel. So Gondor is able to get aid pretty quickly. Lake Town has Dale next to it, which has Lonely Mountain, and Lake Town is about 2-3 days away from Dale and Lonely Mountain. So those three communities don't really have anything else except for maybe Thingol's. I think it's Thingol. No, that's Silmarillion. The Mirkwood elves, the Green elves, the Legolas's people are also close to there, but even that's like a week's travel, or maybe not quite a week, but kind of a distant travel. I mean, it was in the lake. Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of... They were off on their own. They were facing, quote-unquote, Easterlings, which are other members of the East, other men of the East that Sauron had control over. So, if you put it this way, think a game of Risk that involves just Africa, Asia, and Europe. And one player controls Africa and Asia, and the other player controls Europe. Europe being the free peoples. It's going to sound like kind of a... Yeah, I'm going to get into the other thing later, but yeah, that's basically the idea, is Europe trying to resist the tide after tide after tide of just people. It really... They didn't have anybody strong enough. He wasn't taking physical form yet anyway, so you couldn't go against him face to face. He did not have a physical form yet. He was rebuilding one. And while he was rebuilding one, he was taking out turns to send out people to destroy his enemies. And really, what you see in the book and what you see in the book is really just a minor part of the entire, not a minor part, it's a major part of the war, but it's only a minor part of his forces. It's just the first wave. Maybe the second. Because it's been going on for 5-6 years, something like that. But yeah, this is only really the first wave that he sends against them. That wave has little mini waves, but yeah, this is he doesn't get past sending the first wave of forces. He has battles going on all up and down the borders between the east and the west. Lonely Mountain, Lothlorien gets attacked, Mirkwood elves get attacked, everywhere that the free peoples are get attacked that's along the eastern border. And he even has some spies moving along in the Shire, as you learn later with the scouring of the Shire, though those maybe actually those were more connected to Saruman than Sauron. I would almost kind of find that the same difference. Anyway, so the very fact that you have this guy who can go toe to toe with pretty much any one thing in the world, or any group of orcs or men, and he is not enough to actually win the day. At the end of the novel, he's not leading the army that saves the world. He is leading the distraction. He knows he's leading the distraction. All of the ostentatious acting, the call out Sauron to face the crimes and all that, is all done to make himself look like somebody who might have the ring. He is a distraction. That is his job. The person who's actually performing the most important aspect is Frodo and Sam. And you learn later Gollum, though that's not planned by anybody. This is what makes him not a boring, invincible hero for me. If Aragorn, at the end of the story, were to save the world by using his sword to kill Sauron finally, and making it safe for Frodo to put the ring in the fire as an afterthought to the War of the Rings, that would have been the boring, invincible hero. The war didn't. If Frodo ended up destroying the ring after the end of the war, that would be boring, invincible hero. The fact that you have what would otherwise be a boring, invincible hero, and he's not really, because we just don't see the part of his story that makes him a little bit deeper, unless you look into the appendixes and the unfinished tales, which tell more of his story than Lord of the Rings does. If Aragorn were the key element, not Frodo, I would say that the strike against him is more clear. But because at the end of the day he is just the distraction, just the bodyguard, and that his acts in and of themselves can't win. It doesn't matter how many orcs he kills. Eventually he will lose just from sheer fatigue, and he knows it. That fact keeps him out of boring, invincible hero area. And it makes having the level of skill of what a boring, invincible hero would have otherwise. If you were a boring, invincible hero, it doesn't matter how big or small the armies would be. He would scale the cliffs of Mordor, get in past all the guards, and hack his way up through the Dark Tower and kill Sauron again, and then cut open a swath of a safe pathway for Frodo to throw the ring in the fire. That would have been boring, invincible hero. He doesn't do that. He is an awesome fighter. He is probably one of the best fighters in the world, bar none. Either on the side of good or the side of evil, he's probably one of the greatest warriors of the living day. And he's great strength of mind and intelligence and will as well. And the very fact that somebody like that is not enough to win the battle just hammers home the point that you need something subtler than just force of will or force of arms. You need intelligence, you need strategy, you need a overall plan. You need someone to make a sacrifice. The entire fact that after everything, even before, way before he starts leading the vanguard up to the Black Gates, everything Gandalf has the company do after they leave Frodo is very, very noisy. Everything Gandalf advises is geared towards drawing a huge amount of attention westward. As soon as Frodo's out of the picture and Gandalf comes back from being discorporated when his fight with the Balrog, everything he advises is to be very blatant, very, very blatant. He even starts using his magic more blatantly because it draws attention. I mean, in the going up over the mountains, which they failed to do because of the snowstorm, which was not sent by Saruman in the book, by the way. Everything Gandalf does up until he leaves Frodo. I mean, when he's going up into the mountains, and he says he's reluctant to even light a fire because it will draw attention to the area if he uses magic to light a fire. And in the book, he says after he lights a fire because it would kill, because if without the fire they would all die, or at least the hobbits would. When he does, he says, "There, now I've alerted everybody within hundreds of miles or the equivalent thereof that Gandalf is here." And it's basically, we've lost our stealth. And then they try to regain the stealth by going back under Mines of Moria, and he fights the Balrog and dies. Or gets discorporated, whatever it is that happens to Mayar. Anyway, after he gets sent back to continue doing his job, Gandalf goes towards King Theoden and makes a very public and blatant display of curing King Theoden of his despair. I'm not sure Saruman was a part of that. I don't think he was. It says in the book that it looks as if years of weight fall off of him, but not exactly sure that is as literal an interpretation as it seems to be in the movie. I don't particularly mind. I like it either way. Anyway, after curing Theoden very publicly, he advises Theoden to, because Theoden's mind after he's been cured is to go out into battle, kill as many orcs as he can, maybe die a valiant death. But he is basically tremendously offended. It probably would take out a lot of orcs, but it would be a long, drawn out, very bland battle for him to do it the way he wanted to do it. Gandalf's solution is, Gandalf first of all wanted Theoden to go up into the hills with the women and children behind Aedoras, and Theoden said, "No, you underestimate your own leechcraft. I'm going to go into battle with you. I'm not staying behind behind the lines like an old man." So he goes off, and then after hearing that, Gandalf, it was hearing that or before hearing that, at some point, Gandalf advises him to go to Helm's Deep. And the reason why Gandalf wants Theoden to go to Helm's Deep is because he knows it's going to attract Saruman's attention, and that Saruman would send a very large army to deal with Helm's Deep. Helm's Gate. Helm's Keep, excuse me. Just to tell you how, just to give you a hint, though, however, the army that Saruman sends to Helm's Deep is in the neighborhood of 10,000 people or so. That is roughly twice the size of cavalry that maybe a little bit closer to that. That even Theoden just sends in cavalry, not infantry. He outruns his infantry. He leaves his infantry behind to guard Rohan against any stray orcs. The only reason Theoden didn't have 10,000 people at the Battle of Helm's Deep. Now I know why I was sounding off. Helm's Deep. The only reason why he didn't have like 10,000 or so people at Helm's Deep is because he just gathered together as many people as he could in an emergency in 2 or 3 days. The rest were all scattered around the nation and couldn't be gathered until they were starting to get ready to go off to Gondor and help Gondor. But bringing it to Helm's Deep, Gandalf knows Saruman will go to try to take Helm's Deep because Helm's Deep is a very defensible location. Saruman can't go past Helm's Deep and ignore the people here to go take Edoras, because then the people in Helm's Deep will come out of Helm's Deep and take his orcs from behind and do lots of damage, and maybe some other group would come in from the front. So he has to take out Helm's Deep. This is kind of like the situation in Alamo. They couldn't just go around. They had to get rid of it. And that is Gandalf's intention, is to have a long siege with massive numbers of people, uses lots of power like the blasting and all that, and the rain that Saruman sends, which I think Saruman does send that, and then have it come out with a in the nick of time saving, which he does. I don't know if he actually planned to get that close. But yeah, that entire thing, the Helm's Deep situation, was keyed to make Sauron go, huh, that's interesting. Everything Aragorn does from that point. And Aragorn either already knew Gandalf's plan or figures it out real quickly. Because, well, actually, Aragorn and most of the Fellowship are aware that they want to keep the eye off Frodo, and so Gandalf immediately just switches into keeping the eye on us, not Frodo. And Aragorn switches to that mindset as well, too. Everything Aragorn does is a distraction. He's trying to do two things. He's trying to preserve the people that are in the way of the forces that are already out in the world. And he's trying to make Sauron forget about Frodo, or consider Frodo useless, or even just not know about Frodo. Here's the thing. This is basically Gandalf's stratagem, which Jackson gives to the whole distraction thing is Gandalf's stratagem from the beginning. Jackson has Aragorn come up with it late in Return of the King, the movie, and after Gandalf is looking like he's giving up. Anyway, again, I guess that was to make him less of a boring invincible hero again. That was to revitalize how, I'm going to go ahead and take up the call now because, well, I need to. Okay. Anyway, the very fact that everything Aragorn's doing is geared towards lasting as long as he can and distracting the bad guy make him really not a born invincible hero. He's not trying to win the war. He's trying to survive the war and help other people survive the war. And he's trying to help somebody else win the war. That's one of the reasons why it's really a good thing that he is as badass as he is in the book, because it just underlines the whole can't win by force. He's like, basically, I'm the most badass person you are ever going to meet this side of the afterlife, and I'm only one person, and having me is not going to be enough. I'm the distraction. That's all I am. I'm not going to win. Our only hope of winning is someone who is not very much of a fighter. That really kind of underscores the whole can't win by force thing, that he is so great and yet is aware that everything he does on his own is only really temporary. And I've been ranting for 30 minutes, so I'm going to stop now, I think. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and stop and